Tracy. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm
Thank
good.
you for being here.
Yeah.
This is a very special treat for us. You see how we both got dressed up for you?
I mean, so did I. I have a up.
I feel like we were all reading from the same script, maybe this one.
Kind of.
Yeah. But wow, I'm so grateful that you're here right now. I feel like we're about to embark on a really important conversation, and I'm just super grateful that you agreed to come on and share your story and talk about it.
I'm happy to be here, truly.
So, for those listeners that don't know who you are, I have to give you a little bit of a backstory. So, you and I have known each other for a long time, right? Just a couple decades, and always been, had that special connection with each other, cared about each other a lot. And it wasn't until, decades later that I found out that you had the experience that you're about to talk about. And you fast forward, ended up making a documentary about it. So tell us what the documentary is about in short. And also, if you don't mind, tell us how you even came to the point where you made this documentary, because I know there's an interesting backstory to that.
Sure. I will start with, this has been ongoing for roughly 11 years. So it took a really long time to crystallize what I was actually doing. And so the film, as it is now, that I made is about, it's a personal documentary that's about my own family, a Italian-American family, and it's about the sort of generally it's about love and fear and trauma, but more specifically it's about kind of exploring these conversations with my family members and revealing over those conversations generations of abuse, different kinds of abuse, physical, sexual abuse, that just was sort of hidden and brushed under the rug, and for many reasons. But the process of making this was almost part of my own healing, and in that, abuse is silenced and not exposed for many reasons, shame, fear, and all of that. But part of my duty in making this film was just realizing that silence is perpetuated, and that is why this happens and continues to happen. So the work for me was realizing that and recognizing the necessity of telling a story like this, not only for myself, but for other people possibly in similar situations. But it didn't start out this way. It started in 2009. I was making a film about an animal shelter. I was very into saving animals and loved animals. And I was, I just sort of stumbled upon this place in upstate New York that if anybody is in the film industry or knows documentaries, there's a film called Grey Gardens, which is an eccentric, interesting film about a woman. And this woman who ran an animal hospice reminded me of that film. And what I wanted to do was move into directing, because I'm a creative director, and I do a lot of work in the industry, but not necessarily directing. So I went there to this property in upstate New York with this woman who was eccentric and interesting, but dedicated her life to saving animals. And what I found when I was there trying to make a film about her was that some of the animals, there was about 400 on the property. Some of them were possibly neglected and abused, whether she was conscious or not. It was a problem. And I started to look at myself and question why I was there in the first place, like why I was so obsessed with helping these animals and saving these animals, and realized that in therapy, just working through what that was about for me, and sort of this kind of breakdown of what I thought was amazing, I realized I was almost trying to save them versus looking at my own pain. Like I identified with them. I saw these little voiceless beings and I was unable to help them, which kind of reminded me of myself being kind of not protected and voiceless as a younger child. So that sort of was the catalyst to, okay, well, this is more about me and I need to look at my own healing and my own process. And then I put that down and started to have these conversations. And then it just turned into a film that once you're in these intimate conversations with family members, the story of the animal shelter just kind of fell away and became less and less relevant.
Right. Quick question about that. Did you ever end up having a conversation with the lady about why the documentary was going to sort of about her was going to unravel, or did it just kind of?
That was complex because PETA, the animal rights activist organization, came in undercover and kind of shut her down because of all this footage that they had, which was an extreme version of what she was doing. So there's like such a spectrum. I think she had good intentions. And PETA doesn't believe that we should have pets, domesticated pets. So there's like two ends of a spectrum. And I just slowly removed myself because at the time it wasn't really clear anyway. I just knew, just like I knew that I couldn't get involved and I just needed to step away. And then also all this other information was being revealed to me. So just kind of made
Well, it's interesting because I feel like as humans, we want to, just to make our lives a little bit easier, we want to put things in the everything is good or everything is bad category.
Yeah.
It just makes life, we can just handle life quicker like that and move on. But I think, look, listening to your story, it sounds like that was sort of you fertilizing the ground for what was about to happen for the real documentary, which was Relative.
That's interesting. I never thought about that because it is so in the gray, both experiences, and that duality of good and bad and right and wrong and all of the gray of it in between.
Right. Because when you went in to start that documentary, it was about, I think, highlighting this lady for the goodness, like the good stuff that she was doing. And then as you're spending time there, you're like, oh, wait a second, not all of this is good. There's some not okay stuff here. So now what is the documentary about? Is it an expose about all the bad stuff, or is it, oh man, that must have been super confusing. But again, then that becomes the catalyst for what you create, because now we'll shift over to your documentary Relative, which is about your life. And I see literally the same thing, because you have something bad that happened to me, but it's entangled with people that I love.
Yeah.
So you had to start training your brain to think like that in order to process that, to even be willing to go there, because it's, like you said, so gray.
Very complicated.
Very complicated.
Yeah, layers of feelings. And I think that plays into why it's perpetuated.
Right. Yeah.
Incest specifically in families, because it's so wrapped in all of it.
Right.
Can I ask, this is part of human evolution, right? As a species. And it's interesting that you mentioned that you saw this in animal kingdom, in a sense, right? Because basically everything is given for us to reflect on things. So we can reflect back to us and realize, oh, wow, where is my painful parts, fear, or whatever hidden within, and start to just come back to self and see what is okay, what is not okay. And we humans, at least I'm willing to think this way, that we become more and more conscious beings. So we have to, or we do separate, in a sense, ourselves from this animal. We are still coming out of that, right? We still are that mammals. We are mammals. but we evolve so much that we have to speak about certain things which we don't do like mammals does.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is this a conversation about this?
I've never thought about it that way, but it is. I mean, it's just consciousness and the ability that we have, if we're willing to look at it, to see that reflection and to work through it in this lifetime. So I always was fascinated by the catalyst of how I started this journey, because I think there is so much of what we do that we are doing that is informed by an unconscious history or past. So I wanted to keep that part, I wanted to keep that a part of the story, because I felt it was important as a reminder to look at why we're doing things that we do. But for other reasons, it didn't make sense for this particular film. But I do think that's fascinating for you to bring up.
There's like a million questions that are going through my mind right now. So my first question is, you were going through your own spiritual journey, right? When you started the first, like the beginning of the documentary that never manifested, you had already started sort of expanding your consciousness and diving into spirituality, or when did that part of your journey start?
So I knew from a very early age, actually, that I had this ability to tap into something, and it was so big that it scared me. So I actually even had a woman, because I was volunteering at the Catholic Church at that time. I think I might have been in 7th grade. And I had a woman come over to my house. She was an adult. I was also in youth ministry and engaged in that way in the community, but I don't remember exactly why I was close to her, but she was very committed to the church and involved. And she for some reason was at my house one day. And I remember she said to me something about having something special and not denying that or acknowledging that or something. And it was almost too much for me to handle, because I was like, I'm 14. I don't know what, so I kind of, I feel like I remember moments in my life where I consciously closed those doors. And over time they would pop up, whether it was, one memory I have was walking into a Christian church and just feeling like I know that I had abandoned my, I don't know what to call it, myself, the path, and then again shutting it down. So moments like that had happened. In 2009, when I started this film, I was in a 9-year relationship with a woman, and she, maybe just a few months into that film, the process, she just woke up one day and was like, I'm not in love with you anymore, and walked out. So that was another catalyst to sort of, I went dark, and then came out again, finding my way again, and really diving into the practice, like, of all of it, just through yoga, meditation, healing journeys, working with indigenous cultures, and just being as open as possible to all forms of healing and spirituality, my own definition of what that meant to me. And so around 2009 is when I really started to like sculpt it and incorporate it into my being and have it become a part of my life.
Interesting. So what I hear you saying is that it was always there, but you don't really know what to call it or what it is, right? And I could definitely connect to that. And Agris and I actually were having a short conversation right before this podcast, and we were saying that same thing. And we've been really diving in head first into whatever you want to call spirituality, consciousness, transcendence, all of that stuff. And I'm still experiencing how scary that is sometimes. Like that. It's like, oh yeah, we want it, we want to taste it, we want to touch it, we want to feel it, we want to know it, we want to know it all, and then we're like dive in and we're like, oh wait a second, hold on here, like let me just come back a little bit and take a couple of steps back. So I definitely can understand that. And also me growing up Christian as well, there's a lot of fear-based ideology wrapped into that. So everything we don't understand, there's just so much fear that we're just like, oh, just get it away from me. Like I don't even want to go there.
Yeah.
And we could have a whole different conversation about that. But I'm curious because you said you said a 9-year relationship, or did you say
Yes.
11? Okay, so a 9-year relationship. And so I've known you for a really long time, obviously way before you got into that relationship. I always knew you as a super loving, like smiley type of person, someone that brought joy to a room. You would never ever know that you were walking around with the kind of pain that you were walking around in. Like you just would never know. But I do know from my own trauma, that I've come to terms with even recently, that shows up when you enter into a relationship. So
Yeah.
I'm curious what you have to say about that.
Well, two things. I think it's important to talk about the fact that even though you might experience trauma, or I shouldn't say you, one person, myself included, just because I can speak to this, I think it's important to have as part of the conversation. It doesn't necessarily manifest as conscious pain.
Mm-hmm.
So that idea of walking around with that heaviness and that pain/trauma, I'm not sure how many people, I mean, it's an interesting conversation, but I do know that I didn't feel, there were many times of darkness and just question and confusion and discomfort, but I do think sometimes we may have experienced some form of trauma and we don't actually realize the depth of it until we actually look at it. So that's just, I think, interesting. And then, yes, I do think intimate relationships require you to be more present and share more and be more vulnerable. And all of those things, I think, bring up trauma and require you to, I think, to what I've found through this process, at least, and through these intimate conversations, is that you can't have real connections with people unless you are as open and honest and true to yourself. And that if there's all of these things, conscious or unconscious, blocking that, it affects the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I could, that relationship at the time could only be so deep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it was. That's
Yeah, and there's a lot of probably, I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong, because everybody's going through their own thing individually, but there's a lot of projection, right? Like if whatever pain that we have like in our body, if we're not taking ownership over that, right, which that's the first step, right, acknowledging that there's even something there and then allowing ourselves to feel it and then heal it, right? So if we're not doing any of that, then it's all like pointing the finger at the other person.
yeah.
I mean, that's at least what I felt.
Yeah, I for sure. I mean, I think so.
And so so now that you've done so much healing work, and I'd love to dive into that a little bit, but have you seen how it's transformed your relationship, not only with your wife, but also with your children?
Yes, it's all relationships, I should say, not even just my wife, but also my mom.
Mhm.
You can even see it a bit in the film, our relationship transform a bit. But but at the time of the film, it was still fractured, and I was walled,
Mhm.
because some of those moments were even in, like around 2015, I think, is when I was really shooting a lot of that. So it's a while, it's been a while. But yes, I definitely feel I'm not healed,
Mhm.
it's like of course there's challenges, but I do think if something comes up in a relationship, and whether it's with my wife or with my children or with my mom, sister, it forces me to look at myself and my role and involvement in that,
Mhm.
and what I might not be seeing, what I could do better, all of those things.
Yeah, there was that whole thing was so incredibly interesting to me because from my perspective, as I was watching that all unfold, there was this sense that, I have, like, speaking on behalf of your mom or your grandmother, like it seemed like their response was, I've figured out how to deal with this for so long and I really don't want to go there, but I'll do it for you. You know
Yes.
what I mean? Like that was the feeling that I got, right?
Yeah.
And so, but as the film progressed, I could see that there was more, it was more than that. So you had to like take the initial blows in a sense. Like
Yeah.
you had to be the one to be courageous enough to be willing to risk it all, right? Because your whole entire family could have just completely unraveled and you may have decided to blame yourself for that. But something inside of you, like you trusted something inside of you so strongly that you were like, I'm willing to go through this process and risk whatever happens in order to, I don't know, tell me what, like, was it your own healing process? Was it their healing? Or was it like, because I know it was generational trauma here, but was it on a massive scale? Like, how many other people that will never have the courage to stand up and say what happened to them? I'm just curious from your perspective, what was kind of getting you through that process step by step?
I'm not sure if it was conscious that it was my own healing, but it definitely, it would always, the blurriness and the confusion around why I was making it and why I was even doing this kept
Mhm.
coming up, and I kept working through that in therapy, and I
Mhm.
had to keep reminding myself, because that's part of diminishing
Mm.
what has happened. And so I wasn't I think every time I think it was like for maybe it's just my sort of universal like lesson that I had, it felt like what I was put here to do is, and I couldn't ignore, I knew, or at least at the times when I was clear, I knew that this was the way out. This was the way of healing, not just for me, not for them even, but
Mhm.
ideally for them, but like for all, because that was the work. The resistance was part of the problem. The silence is part of the problem. And I would be a hypocrite if I did just shut it down. And believe me, there were many, many, many times that I couldn't keep going. But it was essential. It is essential. It's essential to talk about. And it's even bigger than the theme of abuse. It's discourse. It's about conflict, and it's about love and working through that. And how do you do that? How can you be closer to people? How can you have more empathy? The only way through is to try to deeply understand yourself and the person.
Right. It's something that I've struggled with. I want to go back to, I want to say it was maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I was doing an online like mastermind for meditation, and you were one of the callers that called in. Do you remember this? Do you
Vaguely.
remember? Okay, so I'm gonna bring you back. You ready? So jump into the time capsule. So you called up, and I think you were just starting to experiment with meditation, and I was teaching it in a few different places in the city, on Long Island and in New Jersey. And I loved meditation because it was something that I could do to kind of regulate my emotions, to also deepen my spiritual connection, right? Like I had access to things beyond the physical, and I just couldn't say enough good things about it. But I remember you calling up and saying that you were not having what I was experiencing as like this blissful sort of like relaxing. You were having sort of a rush of uncomfortable emotions, right? Which now like makes so much sense. And I wish I understood then what I know now, because obviously we're both on our own journey. But I realized that that's because, and I don't know if I said this then or if you've ever heard it since then, but like I imagine it like this. If you're okay, so here I am answering your question, by the way, 8 years later.
Thanks. Well, timely.
It took me a little while. But so just imagine that you have a soda bottle, right? So there's obviously carbon dioxide in there. And so if you shake the bottle, if someone comes along and just opens the top, it's just going to explode everywhere, right? And so I always looked at a meditation as you're putting your hand on the top and you're slowly opening it a little bit. And if you drop a soda bottle and if you slowly open it, then the air comes out and you can control it and it doesn't like pour out, everywhere. And so meditation is helpful because it allows you to release those emotions. So that's essentially what you were experiencing. In a healthy way, you're able to sort of let out those emotions, right? That you've had bottled up for so long inside of you. What I didn't know, because you think you know someone, but you don't. And I'm realizing now you really don't at all. Like not just me and you on a personal level, but just I'm realizing that's my relationship with everybody. And we can go into that in a second. But that's what you were experiencing, was like a lot of intense emotion, and that's repressed for so long, and that's what you're feeling. So do you still meditate, by the way?
I would say I do, but I don't currently. I barely have time to take a shower with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I don't know how you do it with all those kids, but I guess they're a little older.
Yeah, they're a little older
Yeah,
now.
I mean, of course I do when I can here and there, but I would love to have more of a practice in my life these days.
Yeah. So Agris, I know you have probably stuff on your mind, so I'm going to invite you in because I feel like I'm hogging all the questions here.
No, man, like I think it's all about pause. It's a pause, like it's not even so much about meditation. It's about take those pauses, just to, before everything you engage yourself, you just breathe in and take the pause, and that's the
Nice way to put
meditation.
it. Yeah.
I think it's great to go for 1-2 hour meditation, and I'm doing that sometimes, but I'm recognizing more and more. I have 2 kids too, and one is just turned 2, so he takes lots of attention.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just take the pause, looking at the child and just seeing that all the wonder, right? And that, I think that's another part in our lives, really, to heal our childhood traumas, just looking at our kids, right? Just to seeing them, just to, as your mom said on documentary, I just try to protect you, but protect you from my best abilities. That was the best ability she ever could, and could even imagine to do it. And that's what we do. And that's what we do from here and now. Our best possible protection or love, all we can propose. Even though we are the best judges of ourselves, right? We can always think how we can do it better, but that's the best ability, And I think this is what I saw in your movie. It's like your grandma, your mom, they're like, they really try to protect everyone, like, and sometimes the protection is just, yes, like, as you said, shovel, somewhere to be strong,
Mhm.
like your grandma, but she's like, you can even see how it changed by generations, right? Like your grandma was like, I never allowed myself even go that place. It
Mhm.
just, whatever, it happens, I just don't allow myself even to be bothered in a sense, right? Because I have to be strong.
Mhm.
Like in your mom, I see her more sensitive about that. That there is more emotions, like in a sense, I felt this.
Mhm.
And then you are coming like a revolution to reveal everything about generations of us not even looking at this as a problem.
Mhm.
Like I just, for me, I like, Tracey, I see everything like, I don't know why, but I see everything from that, more from the like picture from above, how we uh, going through evolution, how we become aware of things, of situations, and there might be plenty of we have to face these days and talk about. No, I'm to be honest, I'm so grateful for you, just being that, to have that strength and courage to talk about this, because I feel it's not even comfortable even now for you when you worked for this documentary, like 7-8 years you are working for this.
11, but yeah, no, I mean,
How we change, how we
yeah,
become more aware what is in a sense good and what is not. And I think this is what opens up within us these days. They're more this understanding.
yeah,
Sometimes it feels like, oh, there wasn't even understanding that it's something we should talk about.
Right.
It felt this way. It just, for me, is like, I'm so, it's like this, like especially this time, where we stand right now in this part of universe, and as you said, you even feel that it was your role within universe to take this, to come in this role as you, and serve to humanity, to give this message, because you are the messenger.
Mhm.
And this is how I see, like, obviously you can be the best messenger only experiencing things what you talk about. There is no way around, we have to take that experience. I'm just sorry, I'm so touched by you, like by everything you do. It's just like, really, I'm so grateful that there are more and more people, coming and speaking about all this, all this things which humanity going through, and just exploring each other in a sense of that manner,
mm,
which we know it has to change,
mm,
which we know it has to change. It has to be talked into families, into society, in everywhere. It's like I don't have much experience into church and Christianity, though I been going sometimes, to church in the past, but it feels like nobody wants to talk there about this intimacy, sexuality, or whatever it is, but that's like, why? That's a huge part of
yeah,
human beings. That's
Mhm.
that's like, sorry, but when we have that puberty, whatever, like teenagers, this is probably all you can think about, like
Mhm.
this is something, wow, something new comes in my life. Like, I don't know, let's explore, let's think. And this is the in a core essence where the families has to talk about, like with their childs, within like, sorry, I just went to probably too emotional about this everything, but it's so important message here.
I think shame is really hard to talk about. And I think there's a lot of shame wrapped up in intimacy and sexuality. But I do find that this dialogue around the film is really expanding conversations, and it's not like beyond just specifically abuse. And I was, and abuse is sort of like this general idea of power dynamics, right? And so doesn't necessarily have to actually be physical, sexual, mental, but just in families there's such power dynamics and complicated relationships that I actually don't mind talking. I'm very open and honored to be a catalyst for these conversations, because it's unfolding for people. I think after the film, after people see the film, what I'm experiencing is that it feels very accessible and universal. So it's allowing for these conversations that are bigger than just the story of my own family, and really opening people up and giving them, like, having reflections and giving them space to have their own conversations with their own family members. So that's worth it.
Yeah, that was like such a huge part of it, was watching you kind of go through the process. Like, I had the opportunity to go through the process with you and to see, it wasn't like you guys figured it all out and then you were now just talking about how you figured it out. I was like, I actually watched you have that conversation with Nana, and what I could literally feel what she was feeling when she was responding to your questions. And, obviously the same thing with your mom. And it was like, that's probably what so many people wonder what it would be like. Well, I think so many people, and I've realized this recently when I started going on my own healing journey and realizing that it was time for me to deal with a lot of that stuff that happened in my childhood. And then, you can't help, but I didn't make a documentary about it, but you can't help not talk about it when people are like, what's going on in your life? And I'm obviously somewhat of a public figure, so I put a lot of my stuff out there for the same reason that you do. It's just like, I hope that somebody will get something from this, like, even if, and that's new for me, because in the past, it was like, don't be that guy that brings, like, sour milk to the party, like, but now I see everything completely different. I see that, like, everybody wants to have that conversation. Everybody's waiting to have that conversation, whether they realize it or not. And who the F is going to stand up and start that conversation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so, and I realize, it's probably a conversation that doesn't get any easier for you. I don't know. You could tell me if that's not true, but it's just maybe more manageable, and also, you see the value in it. I don't know. Do you feel that it gets easier to talk about it, or does it?
yeah, I really, because it's not every day or every interaction that I just appreciate depth in relationships and conversations. So, and also seeing the conversations help people, and having people reflect on how it affects them. And I actually enjoy the conversations. We just had a screening actually at Montclair State University it was over 100 people in the auditorium, and the Q&A after the screening of the film was one of the best nights of my life to a certain extent, because it was so it's just so refreshing to be able to have those kinds of conversations. And help wherever I can, and also I be very aware that I am not a licensed therapist, you know.
Right.
It's just, I can just offer my own experience from that place, and but hopefully it sparks continued conversations and investigations for them, for people.
That was actually one of my questions for you, because I had a feeling that once you put yourself in a position like you have, people, I would imagine that people would start reaching out to you because you,
Yes, and I think that happens with, I mean, that's not, I think that is part of the healing path as you open yourself up to more and more people and your story. And I do think I've seen that with myself, and I've seen that with other more public figures that are kind of guiding people along. My wife even is a yoga teacher and meditation instructor, and so, but I think it's very important to have that awareness around what you know and what you don't know, and what your influence can have on someone, and really being careful with that. I think it's really a really important part of being in that seat.
Yeah.
if you had a chance to, Agris, I'll let you speak, and then I have a question for you.
No, I for me is like going through my mind is like, you know, once we are talking and showing to humanity that this exists, because many probably knows that it exists within their life, but they not necessarily was like, maybe they thought that, oh, I'm just like this alone, and there's not, like, obviously, you know. And once we do it, you know, my question is like, how do you see how this can, from this place, you know, how this can just help, and you know, how you want to spread this message, you know, how, like, tell us, because we obviously want to be part of this message, you know, to spread this awareness, you know, just to, for everyone to think not from the position, you know, like male, female, whatever, you know, just to think from that position of being just that conscious human being. Like, how important for us is really to acknowledge that this is so different than it used to be even 10, 50, and 100 years ago, that we are going into this new way of living and expressing ourselves as this human species with care, with love, with that's about humanity. What I see, you know, and it's not anymore about role being man or female, you know. It just it's so different now. This, at least I know it's for many, maybe it's not, but for me it's like, this is so important for us really to stand up and talk about this, you know, that just go to finally to look at this world and see, no, we are not so different anymore. We are human species who cares about each other, who really talk about those sensitive things, and we are in the process of really to make it clear in a way. I'm just, I don't know where I'm going, you know, but I'm thinking it's just so important for us, really, like, because I had all those streams back to my life. Oh, how I've been using that I'm man. Like, I literally had this, like, how I'm playing my role. Am I conscious enough? That was my question. No, am I conscious enough? Like, how I'm using, I don't know, my strength or whatever, you know, like my role. I'm incarnated in this life, you know, how I'm using it. Do I using it conscious enough? Or I'm still having some sort of patterns of conditions or whatever I receive, you know, when you grow up as a boy, you know, like, oh, you have to be strong, you have to lead, whatever, you know, all those conditioning things that was put it in, you know, like, and that's just society, what
Yeah.
does it, you know. So how we can evolve from that into that consciousness,
Yeah.
that's what is important for me, really important.
I think that you answered your own question there, which is
Oh,
great. I think that it was like that we as men, right? If we're just talking about men and women for a second, we have a responsibility at this stage in our evolution as human beings to be conscious of that role, right? And to decide to wake up and say, like, this is what was programmed into me, and this is what is okay and what's not okay, and I get to decide how I'm going to do things differently. And I think that's extremely powerful. Like that in and of itself is an extremely powerful part of the evolutionary process, is just being aware. I think that's insane that you would say that, because that's where we all need to be. Like, we all need to wake up and be like, okay, what about what I've learned is not okay? Like, what needs to change? And I think, Tracey, you know, specifically for you, um, and that, again, I could be wrong, so tell me if I'm wrong, but a big part of it, in my perspective, for you is like dealing with the already what happened. You know what I mean? Like, so there's like two parts to this. There's like what happened to you as a result of unconscious living, right? Like not knowing what's right and what's wrong. And like you said it perfectly, like it's not just about sexuality, but it's also about power, right? And like we could have two more episodes just about that, like alone. But this is like this is such an important conversation. There's two parts to this. There's, we have to wake up, people like Agris and I have to wake up and say, this is not okay. And I see it every freaking day with my own children. My children challenge the shit out of me, and I refuse to parent like I was parented. And so I just put it out there, and sometimes I screw it up, and I try to be conscious and I try to be open-minded, but sometimes we get back on that old track, and we are tempted to say it's because I told you so. But we don't want our children to have to be healing the same wounds that we're healing, right? We want them to be further evolved than us. So that requires us to be conscious, right? So there's that. And then there's also, okay, and also, by the way, what about the shit that we went through and the wounds that we're all walking around with? Because I'm done pretending that they don't exist, right? And I'm done like blaming like everything on everybody else just because I haven't been willing to go there and feel that uncomfortable feeling for that period of time it takes to heal something.
Well, you're both here today doing this work. So, and every day, or however many, you know, you're that's doing a lot. And it is really beautiful to see the male. And again, yeah, it's not about gender, but that's a reality of some of the struggle, and just seeing the male support and who's helping carry this film at least through. And it's beautiful to see that masculine energy coming in. Because it's not just like pro women, all women, you know, it's really, my editors, even my main editors are men. It's kind of beautiful.
And we have both within, you know, they're both
Oh, right.
energies within, masculine and feminine. That's who we are, you know. And I think people forgets that, you know, they just been put in one role position and like, now go like this, that's who you have to be. But they forget that we are, but you know, for me within, I sometimes feel that I'm more feminine than masculine, even though I'm tall, big guy, you know, played sport, whatever, you know. And you think like, oh, it's always been that part of, you know. And I know, and it's, in a sense, I've been in situations in my life, you know, and I actually, it's those situations in my life when I did modeling in Italy, you know, and I felt that energy from masculine, you know, some sort of inappropriate touchings or something. I don't know what does it feels,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you think like, and at that time was like, oh, it must be normal. It must be like how it is in this business, you know. It must be normal. Is it? But
Yeah.
I don't blame anyone in a sense, you know. It's just the way how we are evolving as a human species, you know. Just like we finally has to start to be conscious about those things within each other, you know, and start from ourselves today, right now. That's the best what we can do, because there's like, you cannot change the past, and thanks to the past for that we can reflect on this, but it's something we cannot change. We can just, as we said, we cannot change the past circumstances, but we can change the state of emotion, how we look at this. That is within our power, what we can change from past, that emotional state, how we, what kind of gift we are taking out of this, because it's all about gifts, you know. It's
Find
a
your
gift.
gift and give it away. That's my favorite quote.
Hmm?
Find your gift and give it away. It's one
Yeah,
of my favorite quotes.
even though there are gifts in most uncomfortable past situations, but there are gifts out of this, and this
Right.
is one of the gift you are sharing now. That is a gift, you know. I see this as a gift, because it's a gift to all the humans to reflect, to look at their ancestors and family, how everything was, like how we grown up, and how we got conditioned in certain things. It's just really, it's just amazing gift of reflection.
And it's amazing, Tracy, how the conversation itself is like, is the most important thing here, right? I mean, like, isn't that step one?
Yeah.
Because I'm feeling like more and more right now, and you probably feel this too, that this conversation is starting to happen all over the place. Like, I've shared this a couple of times on this podcast, and it's like people are getting together with their old friends, and the conversation is shifting. People are opening up more. People are willing to have these conversations. And so I guess that's kind of where I want to end with you with this, even though I feel like there's a lot more that we could say, but I know that you agreed to come back one more time before the film comes out in the fall. We could talk about that. But for those people, from your personal experience of having your own journey, and then also making this documentary, and then having doing the public speaking, connecting with so many people, what can you say to those people that know that something happened to them and they're just freaking afraid to say anything about it because they're so afraid of how much worse things could get if that conversation gets started?
Well, it is debilitating, that fear. I think you start like step by step, day by day, and talking about it with people you trust, loved ones that you feel safe with. I think that's really important, to feel safe with them. And then, I mean, I am such a fan of psychology and therapists. I think just having the space to self-reflect and have someone that has, separate from your friend circle, your family circle, just have a perspective on your life is so incredibly valuable. And then just, aside from that, sort of having this awareness of self and self-respect, and not seeing that as selfish, but taking care of yourself. And part of taking care of yourself is imperative, because that's ultimately what ends up affecting other people. So if you're coming at it from a good place and coming into your relationships and your everyday experiences from a more mindful place, those moments will be better, deeper, more meaningful. So I think sometimes we think about taking care of ourselves as selfish, but it's like, it's like better for everything and everyone. And so yeah, there's a lot of fear, but I do think there's fear, and then there's love, and then just tapping into the love and where you feel safe is very important. And sometimes when you're sort of paralyzed by the weight of it all, do nothing, sit and get clear and get your mind clear, and then so the answer and the help will just come, hopefully.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Can I add as another, just because I'm so touched by this, because I've been, for last 16 years, I've been guiding talents, in a modeling industry, and I managed many young girls into this industry, and I always said to them, listen, if you feel that something is not okay, you say that, whatever it is. It's, you use your voice, use your sense within, that whatever it feels it's not okay, you tell it. You step up and say no, whatever it is, and don't think that there is something normal or whatever feels not okay. You have to voice about that.
I think it's very important to teach the younger generation that, and I'm trying to do that with my daughters, even at this age. Just agency and voicing what's okay and what's not okay, and then practicing, I hear you, your words work, and not forcing myself or my needs on their bodies at all. Even if I just want to hug in the morning, it's like, no, they're in the mood.
Yeah.
And I think that starts at a very early age.
Yeah, we just have to teach our kids and talk more about that and again, that other person probably is not even aware what he is doing. It's just probably he's just not even thinking or whatever, it's just, and that's why we have to come back to ourselves and be that authority within and say that, because that's probably somebody doesn't know even that they are hurting us. And not probably like even 100% they don't, reflects instincts, conditions, whatever it comes into play for the human beings, and just whatever, if we feel uncomfortable with something, we always have a choice to say no, and that's what I would like to finish this episode.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that, because I think that's really important. And to piggyback on what he said, I agree. Tracey, thank you for what you've endured to put this all together, because I know no part of it was easy, but the conversation, it was an intricate part of my own healing journey, and then becomes the impetus for the conversation with my children. I watched it on Friday morning when they came home. I was like, okay, we're going to have a conversation. And we've had the conversation before, but we're going to have it again. We're going to have it one more. I just want to make sure that I said it this way. Have I said it this way yet? And I'm like, no, not quite. But why are we having this conversation? But that's why, because this needs to be the normal. you know,
Yeah.
like where it's okay. You know, like we can't go back in time and change what's happened to you, and we can't go back in time and change what's happened to me or Agris, but there are, thank God, things now that we can do to assist in the healing process of that. And then even what's more important than that is, like you said, I don't know that I'm completely healed, but there's still so much power in thwarting this from happening to the next generation. And I'm willing to like fall on that sword, you know what I mean? Just so that other people have sort of a fair shot at this human experience without having to deal with that part of things.
Mhm.
Yeah, any part, man, any part, whatever you feel uncomfortable, say no.
Yeah.
Whatever, anything,
Yeah,
really, really anything, really. Thank you
right.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you
So
guys.
grateful.
This is a beautiful conversation, and yes, I'm happy to come back when the film is actually launching.
Which will be in the fall. Right.
Yeah, October or November.
Okay. Well, we put your social media links in there so they can jump on there and
On the website, which is relativefilm.com, there is a slot you can put your email to get an update when the film is actually available for viewing. So
perfect.
definitely let's put that out there.
Well,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
We love you.
Love you. Thank you guys. Thank you both.